This is a Homage beat.
What's poppin', everyone? Admire. Okay, so the Nokia 7.2 was launched last year. It was a pretty good phone at the time and it had a lot of recommendations from a lot of people. But right now in 2020, with prices of phones and other things going up, is it worth getting a second-hand version of this phone? Let's actually look into it. So when it comes to looking into a second-hand product, most times, everyone is even more critical about every part of the phone than they normally would. So, take for instance the build quality. It has a glass back protected by Gorilla Glass 3 and also Gorilla Glass 3 on the front. But now, the thing is glass and glass always breaks. So, it depends on how careful you are with the usage of your phone and if you're also someone that uses a case. If you're someone that uses a case, the back glass will always be fine. Now, I like the fact that it has a matte texture to it. It comes in three colors: cyan green, charcoal, and ice. Ice is basically white, charcoal is black, and cyan green is basically green. What I like about the design is the fact that the back is a matte texture. It doesn't grab fingerprints at all. It's also flat. Like, it's flat, but it has rounded corners as opposed to the boxy look that I prefer, which the Samsung Galaxy Note phones have. It's not a complaint from me. It's just, I think it would look a bit better if it just had a bit more boxy sides. But then there are people who prefer the rounded corners over more squared off edges. Now, one thing about the phone is that it's quite thick. Now, the first time I held it, I immediately noticed this. And it's a bit concerning to me because if the phone is this thick and it's not even packing in a very huge battery, it's a 3500 milliamp hour battery, which does pretty well in most conditions. It doesn't really overdo itself, as of course. But then adding the fact that this doesn't have a 90 Hz refresh rate or even any form of a high refresh rate at all, and it's powering a 1080p screen, I'd say that you expect battery life to be pretty decent, especially depending on the kind of person that you are. Now, the thickness of the phone, it was a bit disturbing to me, but then it's not a complaint. If you have big hands, this will feel like a piece of paper to you. But then if you're someone like me that has more average sized hands, then you may notice it, but you'll get used to it in just over a few minutes of using the phone. Another major part of consideration when it comes to phones that you're going to buy is the processor that comes in the phone. This phone comes with the Snapdragon 660, which is the same chipset that you see in the Xiaomi Redmi Note 7. It handles every day-to-day tasks fluidly. There is no need to worry, especially with the fact that it comes with up to 6 gigabytes of RAM. The base variant starts with 4 gigabytes, and the top end variant ends off with 6 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage, which is fine for most people. So with the Snapdragon 660 in this phone, going through everyday tasks, handling social media, playing games, all of these things will work out fine for you. You won't have any form of complaints. You may notice a few frame drops in some games like PUBG because, well, this chipset isn't the top end, but then for the price point, you will not have any complaints. I guarantee you that. And since we're on the specs, let's actually talk about that Android One written on the back. Android One normally guarantees that you'll have at least 2 years of software updates. And this phone, when it was released, was launched with Android 9. So, of course, if you are someone who expects to get Android 11, then for sure, After a little while, this will also get upgraded to Android 11. But then there shouldn't be Android 12 for the phone. It's just a small thing in case you were curious about that. Now, aside the design and the performance and the screen and the battery, one of the major parts that a lot of people pay attention to the most, and the part that I wanted to actually get into very, very well, is the camera. So it has a triple camera setup on the back, housed in this round shape. Now, I have to praise Nokia for this. This was among the first pushes into the rounded shape that we normally see these days. These days, we see a lot of camera squares and a lot of camera rectangles. I like this look, especially since it makes the phone look distinct. And then with the fingerprint scanner right under it, it looks even better. Now, this camera circle is housing a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 5 megapixel depth sensor. How do images from these cameras come out? Okay, now my thoughts on the main camera are a bit mixed. I don't know if this is how everybody thinks, but I believe that anybody, the average consumer, will not want to take a picture with his phone and then take the picture into Snapseed or Lightroom or any photo editing app to start doing things like color correction, a little bit more saturation, desaturation, white balance. I don't think the average consumer wants to do that. What they want to do is point, shoot, and just upload straight to social media or anywhere they wanted to go. So the Nokia 7.2's photos, where they're good, they're very detailed because, of course, it's a 48 megapixel lens. But then the issue I have is, one, it's a bit overexposed, and two, it normally biases towards cooler tones in the white balance. But then this is a small complaint from me. There are people who like this more cold, bright look. I am not really someone that's more into that. I'm more into a more warm and a bit more saturated look. Another thing with the colors is the fact that the Nokia 7.2, it seems to blast the green channel at you like with a lot of intensity. A little complaint from me, but then to most people, you will find this very, very fine, especially concerning the fact that the dynamic range on this phone is actually very good. I was actually surprised when I took this picture that it was able to preserve details in the sun, also mapping out the skies and making everything look beautiful. So if photography is your main aim when you're talking about the Nokia 7.2, you'll definitely be fine with this main camera. The ultra wide camera, now it's an 8 megapixel lens, and of course you can tell it to be less detailed than the main camera. There's also a very noticeable color shift. This one biases towards warmer tones in the white balance as opposed to the cooler tones that you get in the main camera. It's a bit, now I actually like this, and the ultra wide shots are pretty wide. It's a 13mm lens, so it's pretty wide, and I didn't notice any form of barrel distortion when I was taking pictures with this camera. And also the dynamic range on it is actually very good. Like Nokia actually did a very good job when they were cramming in all the things that they were cramming into this camera. The 5 megapixel depth sensor, I don't really see anything that it's doing, to be honest. In this picture, you can clearly see that the image separation is actually very good in the portrait shots. But if you look closely at some of my fingers, you actually notice that it missed some parts of my fingers. I don't know whether that was a mistake from my end or whether that was from the phone, but I didn't have another chance to actually take another picture to actually give you guys. But from what I've seen, if you're taking portraits of people, the pictures will come out fine. But if you're taking pictures of things that have a bit of rough edges, you may have a little bit of a problem there, but it's not a big deal. And it also has a 20 megapixel camera, which I don't know if companies just have this thing for giving us beauty mode in our selfie cameras, because I don't understand how my face is that smooth. There's also the overexposure problem that it has. And for a phone of this price point, it's surprising that there's even that kind of a problem. But then all of these problems I've mentioned, and that's the thing about this review, is if you're someone who is that critical into how your photos look like, you don't want it to be overexposed, you don't want it to be underexposed, you want the colors to be just right, that means that you most probably carry these pictures into a photo editor to make it look to your taste. So all you just need to do is, if you take a picture and you don't like it, edit it to your tastes. My final verdict on the phone is, it's a very good phone. Ample storage if you go for the highest end variant. The lowest end variant also has ample storage with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of internal storage. It has a decent processor that can get every day-to-day tasks done efficiently. It has good cameras that take excellent shots for the most people and can still be improved if you take them to a photo editor. It has a USB Type-C port. It has a pretty sizable battery. It's not big by 2020 standards. In 2020, we're seeing the push towards closer to 6,000 milliamp hour batteries, and this is still about roughly a little bit more than half of that. But depending on your usage and how frequently you charge your phone and how much you use your phone, there won't be a disparity between the battery life you get from those phones and the battery life you get on these phones. But then the only thing that I will complain about is the fact that it doesn't charge fast. It doesn't have an 18 watts charger in the box. It has a 10 watts charger, which to me, I don't know. But then it's a small battery, I guess. So I guess you're a bit justified to actually do that. So the main point is, if you want to go for the Nokia 7.2, you can go for it. It's a classy phone and it gets everything done. That's like the main point of this video. It gets everything done and it does it a bit easily. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. See ya!
This is a Homage beat.